Welcome back to Always Watching. Today we're discussing Past Lives. I totally forgot to review this movie. If you haven't seen it, stop what you're doing and go watch it now. So briefly, Past Lives follows Hae Sung and Nora, two childhood friends who were torn apart when Nora immigrated to Canada. This is an impressive debut by Celine Song, which explores fate, love, loss in an incredibly mature manner. The title of the film, Past Lives, refers to the belief that a person's soul or spirit has lived previous lives before their current one. And the idea of past lives suggests that there's multiple versions of us that exist at one time. And the difference between one past life to another is a decision. Sometimes these decisions are within our control, sometimes they're totally out of our control. Initially, I thought this would be a movie about two lovers coming together. What's meant to be will be, and I'm so glad that it wasn't that. Before immigrating to Canada, Nora's mother sets them up on a date, and what was supposed to be a fond memory ends up being traumatic for Hae Sung, who had no idea that this first date would be their final goodbye. Years later, the movie recreates this first date in order for Nora and Hae Sung to get closure. And this movie is not just about two people reconnecting, but it's really about two people finding themselves through one another. I watched this movie a number of times now, and it just feels incredibly cathartic. Nora and Hae Sung have no relationship outside of being classmates. They're acquaintances. They were never lovers. They never dated. They never went to college together. They never worked together. So their whole relationship is just based in fantasy. Although they do reconnect, and although they do have a connection, it never turns into like a stalker or an obsession, right? No one ever professes their deep love for one another. By coming together, they're able to basically say goodbye to a past version of themselves that although they adore, although that they love, they have outgrown. So starting with what I liked, I thought the pacing was incredible. Normally I don't like time jumps, but the time jump actually really worked in this movie. So the number 12, the movie keeps going up by 12, and so the number 12 is the number of reincarnation, and specifically the need for old habits to die hard. And both Nora and Hae Sung in a way are suffering from nostalgia. You know, they miss this old version of themselves, this part of themselves that was free or just lived in the moment. And as much as they want to go back to that, they know that they can't sacrifice their future for their past. I thought the script was very relatable and very realistic. So many of us have thought about what if I pursued this job, this relationship, moved to this country, what if? And the problem with what if is that you end up fantasizing and thinking that the grass is greener, and so you end up letting life pass you by. And what's worse is that you end up underappreciating or devaluing the life that you're currently living. Everything you need is right around you. And if you're always thinking that the grass is greener somewhere else, you end up missing out on relationships. You end up missing out on basically just life. And I feel like a part of the message in this movie is appreciating what you have and really staying in the present moment, not getting caught up in something that is just totally out of your control, to be honest. I just want to talk about Nora and Hae Sung's relationship and just some things that stood out for me. So Nora and Hae Sung, we meet them when they're children, and Nora is already upset, and she's upset because she knows she's moving. But poor Hae Sung has no idea that his best friend is about to go away. And so before Nora moves, they have this date, one last encounter, and they're having a great time. That is until he discovers that she is moving away. And I think a part of the reason that he misses her, or that he really kind of valued her, is because she was someone that pushed him. Like, they seem to be very competitive, and so without her, he's had to find ways to basically push himself, like really get himself to where he needs to be. And I love the visuals in this movie. Like, although they are parting ways, that doesn't mean that it's goodbye forever, right? Like, nothing's ever a goodbye. You can always circle back. Paths can always recross. Like, nothing is, like, never say never. So as soon as Nora leaves, Hae Sung tries to reconnect with her, but never in an obsessive or crazy way. And one day Nora actually finds him, and the only reason she finds him is because she's on Facebook, and she was looking at people that she went to school with, and comes to discover that Hae Sung was looking for her. So she calls him up, and it feels like no time has passed, and they spend every waking moment not just catching up, but updating each other about their lives, what they're doing, their hopes and dreams. these are really two people trying to find themselves, trying to figure out what they want. And the more time they spend with one another, like, the more obsessive it becomes. Like, each one tries to pull the other, right? Nora's like, come to New York and learn English. He's like, no, I want to learn Mandarin and Chinese. Like, they never sacrifice their future for some fantasy. And eventually Nora has to end the relationship because it just becomes emotionally draining. The entire thing just becomes taxing. And she says something very interesting in their final conversation. She tells him, I immigrated twice to get to New York, and I want to accomplish something. I want to commit to my life here. And a lot of people don't know how to commit to their life, right? They think, they get so fixated on a past moment or a past relationship that they end up believing that, like, their best has already passed them by. Like, things can always get better, but you got to move forward. Committing also means not anticipating your future, like waiting for the right moment to start living. You have to commit, like, whatever it takes. Like, and it could be very small things, but the problem also with the grass is greener is that people be waiting for these moments to start acting or start, like, actually doing the things that they want to do. But no matter where they go, where they end up, there'll always be an anticipation. And the problem with anticipation is that you'll be waiting forever. And if you don't move forward, you'll just, if you're just paralyzed, wondering what if, nothing will get better. And so the movie makes this 12-year time jump, and in this 12 years, Hae Sung learned Mandarin, he ended up having a career, and Nora gets married. And she gets married to someone that she met at this writer's camp. And so the movie ends with Nora and Hae Sung reconnecting and basically recreating this first date, but just in New York, and getting that final closure. And I loved everything about this final sequence, right? It was just so well done. And I forgot to mention it, but this movie is beautifully shot. It's stunning. It's incredible to look at. And so before Hae Sung leaves, the forecast was supposed to be rainy. So he thought he would get to New York and it would just be rainy days all day. And as soon as he lands, it's clear skies. They're able to kick it. They're able to have fun. And I felt like that was really appropriate because they're finally clearing the air. And as soon as Nora and Hae Sung see each other, again, it's been years, it feels like no time has passed. And they spend their time doing what they did before, like updating each other about their lives. And we find out that at one point Nora did actually visit Korea, but she didn't tell him. And she didn't tell him because, again, she was engaged and she didn't want to risk her future for her past. And I love how both characters are constantly aware that they are, like, this is nostalgia. Like, they respect each other, but again, this is really about two people trying to figure themselves out, trying to unpack some part of themselves. And as soon as they come together, like, it felt like two kids coming together. Like, it did really feel like their first date. Like, they're having fun, they're going on Ferris wheels, like, they're really kicking it. And at first I wasn't sure where this date was going, because if you look in the background, you see all these couples, you see all these people holding hands. So you think, okay, this is going to be about two people falling in love and they're going to end up back together. But that's not what happens. And one of the things that really struck me about the film was the level of self-control between Hae Sung and Nora. Like, you can tell there's so much they want to say, but they're very careful. They're very careful not to cross a line. Because if they cross their line, it means they're undervaluing their own life, right? Like, as much as they miss each other, as much as they fantasize about what could have been, they know that it's fantasy. And so their body language, the way they're looking, like, they're so conscious never to breach that barrier. And I thought that was so perfect, because these are two people that have accomplished quite a bit and they are moving forward. So to kind of cross lines and make declarations of love based on absolutely no information it would be disrespectful to both of them. Like, it always stays within the realm of reality. And so during Hae Sung's stay, we meet Nora's husband, and he is an interesting individual because, as jealous as he is and as uncomfortable as he is, he never gets in his wife's way. And they have a very transparent and open relationship, but Hae Sung's presence is making him nervous. And so they have these really open and honest conversations about how they're feeling, which I thought was really fantastic. And he basically just expresses himself. He says, listen, girl, do I know you at all? And I think Hae Sung's presence made him realize that there's parts of his wife that he will never fully understand. But there are parts of, like, you, it doesn't matter how long you know someone, you will never fully understand them. And that's totally normal. And then he starts to really, the way he, like, a part of this movie is like perspective is everything. And the way he basically retold their love story was so demeaning, right? Like, we met at a writer's camp. We then got married for the green card. And I was like, sir, like do you want to add a little bit of spice? And the way he told it was just like everything was so normal. And normal doesn't mean boring or unremarkable. Like, these two people worked incredibly hard to get to that writer's camp to even meet. And I think it's so important for you to pursue your passion or pursue whatever it is you want, because eventually you will be in the right room to meet the right people. And so you can't really dismiss that right away, but he seems to be dismissing it. And he makes probably one of the best lines in the film. He says something along the lines of, you know, you make my world so much bigger. And I hope I do the same to you. And I think a part of his insecurity is Hae Sung's perceived masculinity. You know, he knows that his wife immigrated twice to be here. She's living in this apartment in New York, and he wants to give her everything. And some part of him maybe believes that Hae Sung is much more masculine, and if she was with him, he would give her everything that he wanted. And, you know, he's just not doing his manly duty. And the way he just undercut himself, for me, just showed that he obviously really loved her. He wanted to give her everything. He might not be in the position to do so at the moment, but that doesn't mean he will never be in the position to do so. And also, a part of like the fantasy of what if is thinking that somebody else is better because they have something that we lack. But we often forget that everyone lacks something. Like, maybe what we have is what somebody else wants. And so it's so important to not only just, like, I think what the problem with what ifs is that people end up undermining like what they're good at and hyper focusing on all these things that they lack. And because they lack these things, they'll never really get the life that they want. And that's kind of where his head was going. And Nora's husband is very careful never to fall into self-sabotage. And he's always very careful to just trust his wife, right? He's like, he hangs on to what he knows, which is that they have a strong relationship and he loves her. He does not fall into fantasy. And so the movie ends with the three of them going on a date, right? Hae Sung's final night is with Nora and her husband. And I thought this was so perfect because here's a man that represents her future, her present life, and one that represents her past life. And he does his best to put his best, you know, his foot forward. He looks at Hae Sung like, oh my God, am I about to lose my wife? But again, he's always respectful and he always stays out of the way. And the movie comes full circle and they end up back in this bar. And I love how the movie started with this bar scene and ended in this bar scene, because I had, like, if we knew what we know at the end of the movie, it would be totally different. And during this bar scene, Hae Sung and Nora pretty much hash it out, right? Like they go through, they're like two kids going through like all these what ifs, like, oh my God, what if we were some like couple that hated each other? What if, like, they go through all their past lives and all these things they could have been to one another. And it really does feel like two kids like whispering in a corner and, you know, gossiping. And the whole time her husband stays out of the way. And I really appreciated that because I think he also enjoyed seeing some part of her that he doesn't really know all that well, right? He mentions to her that I'm learning Korean because I want to know how you dream, girl. Like, I want to know all of you. And so I think watching her talk to him and giggle, like it kind of alerted him that there is a part of his wife that he doesn't know, but seeing it come out was really satisfying. And I think that's why he was really happy that Hae Sung came. And same with Hae Sung, he was really happy to meet the husband because I think for him, it validated his own life, right? It validated that I am ready to move on, that I am ready to commit to this future, that I am no longer this little boy that was insecure, didn't know that he was good enough. Like, I am good enough. And so the level of self-satisfaction that you see even in Hae Sung, I thought was quite beautiful. And so the movie ends at night, which I thought was perfect because, again, you get this closure, like everything coming to an end. And Nora is walking Hae Sung to his car. And just before he leaves, he asks her, like, what if this is a past life? What would we be to each other then? And she's like, boy, I don't know. And he's like, I don't know either. And he says, see you then. He doesn't say goodbye. He says, see you then. Because again, never say never, right? Like, paths can always recross and crisscross. And I think watching Hae Sung get into that car, like, he was so happy. Like, he was a little too happy for my liking. Like, he was like, girl, I got my closure. I gotta go live my life. Like, he was beaming, because as he's leaving New York in this car, like, you have to remember the start of the film where he's in this car with Nora, thinking like this girl is going to be in his life forever, and now he's leaving alone, but he doesn't feel lonely, right? I think a part of the reason why he held on to her is because he felt like some part of him was ripped apart when she left, and then he kind of came to realize that actually had nothing to do with her. You know, that's just a part of life, and that's something that he accepted by the end. And I thought the final shot was so beautiful of Nora just walking back to the apartment, and the gravity of what just happened finally weighing on her. Like, she's crying, but it's like happy tears, right? Like, it's closure even for her, because there is this kind of understanding by both of them that they have moved on, and that this part of themselves that they love it's not dead, but has evolved. They have actually become the best version of themselves. Haven't had to sacrifice like, all the sacrifices that they have made have been worth it. And so the movie ends with Nora basically going back to her husband, and he's there waiting for her. And like, that stability, that constant, that reality, like going back to what you know, what you've worked hard for, and what you've built, right? Like, the grass is green where you water it, okay? Like, it ain't green on some fantasy land. And so I really love this movie, and I loved it on so many different levels. And I think, again, the message here is that sometimes we can end up really undervaluing ourselves, because we're so insecure about all these things that we lack, and we never really think about all the things that we have and all the things that we could have. From Nora's perspective, again, this woman immigrated twice to be there, and she built a life, and it's a life that she worked hard for. It's a life that's very intentional, and she's living, you know, exactly how she wants to live, right? She doesn't leave it up to chance. And I think people have to live with intention, and you really have to go after the things you want. That saying, like, reach for the stars, you might fall on a cloud, like something along those lines. And what I enjoyed about Hae Sung and Nora specifically is that these are two people that live very intentional lives. And I think the problem with fantasy and what if is that people can end up thinking that life would be easier on the other side. Like, when we say the grass is greener, we often say what we mean is the grass is, like, it's easier on that side. You know, like, man, maybe I wouldn't have to suffer so hard. Maybe I wouldn't have to do this and that if I just stayed in Korea, or if I just gone to New York, and blah, blah, blah. But nothing is easy. You know, you pick your struggle and you just fight it. You know, and I feel like that was the moral of this story. So you guys let me know what you think, and until next time.